Hi, I'm Dan Hamermesh. I'm Network Director at the IZA and Editor-in-Chief of the IZA World of Labor. I'm really pleased to introduce this set of interviews I had over the past week with leading labor scholars in several different countries. All of them have thought about the coronavirus crisis, effect on labor markets, effects on the economy, and I just want to chat with them and get a perspective. The interesting thing is the countries covered have had vastly different experiences in terms of how they've managed the crisis, the extent to which cases have occurred, deaths have occurred. I thought it'd be really interesting to have this kind of comparative set of interviews going on. The set of interviews was put together by the co-producers, Theodora Ruseva and Olga Notmeyer, and the script was mostly written by Theodora herself. So I hope you enjoy this, and I think it's just really fascinating to look at how different things are across the different markets.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Sixth, with Daiji Kawaguchi, who is professor of economics at the University of Tokyo. Also, I may say, a many times co-author of mine, superb economist and a wonderful person to work with. He's talking from Japan. I'm going to be asking him questions about Japan, about the COVID crisis, and about what Japan has done about it. The first thing to note, however, is that Japan has one of the most impressive records in the world on the COVID crisis. I was just looking at it today, and there have been 33 deaths per million residents, which is phenomenally low. That's 8% of what the US has done, 5% the UK. So it's a tremendous success. So before we talk about the economics, Daiji, let me ask you, how and why has this country, which is very urbanized and very old, how come you've been so successful?
Well, we don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist at all. And I myself wonder why the number is so low. So there is no particular policy implemented by the Japanese government that, make this successful outcome possible. And I think this low number is kind of common in East Asian countries, and like Taiwan or Singapore or the Vietnam or those Asian countries are quite successful suppressing the COVID-19 spread. And we don't know yet the reason why the numbers are so low in this region. Perhaps, yeah.
That's sort of too bad, because I would think that if there were some obvious reason why the success has occurred, mainly tremendous contact tracing. I know in Korea they've traced contacts very carefully. Maybe that would be a reason why, in fact, other countries could copy if they were capable politically.
Yeah, one of the possible reasons is that there is many public health office run by the government, and they track the people who contacted with infected people. So the tracking seems to be more successful than other country. I don't know the experience of the other country well, but Japanese government claimed that their tracking system performed well.
Okay, that may be it, because in the US we essentially have no tracking at all. We try to, but we don't really take it very serious. I think that's the reason. So look, in response to this, has the government done anything macroeconomically to keep the economy going, to help those who have been put out of work? What policies have you done?
So there are two policies, main policies. One is employment subsidy for the furloughed workers. So government provide a 100% subsidy up to 15,000 yen per day. So and it lasts basically unlimited. So usually it is paid out from the unemployment insurance account, but it's quite generous. And some complain that the process takes too much time, but the system itself is quite generous. And also the government provide 2 million yen subsidy, which is 20,000 US dollar for SMEs. And it's basically unconditional transfer. If the SMEs claim that they suffer from this pandemic, then they can receive it. So those government subsidies seems to be, soften the damage given to the economy.
The subsidies are paid. The first subsidy is paid directly to recipients or paid to employers?
So it's indirectly paid to the employers. So it's indirect subsidy. Okay. And there was a direct transfer. That transfer like 1,000 US dollar at one time for everybody. So I myself received 1,000 US dollar as a transfer.
Despite the fact that you haven't become unemployed or suffered in any way, right?
That's right. So there is criticism against this criteria, like everybody. So at the first, government proposed $3,000 transfer to the limited number of people, but there was a criticism against this selection criteria. And then the government changed the policy and decided to distribute 1,000 US dollar everybody. It costed a lot in terms of the fiscal burden.
Yes, it's obviously very costly. On the other hand, unlike subsidies that you might have done, it does not create that doesn't create very large disincentive effects. I mean, it's basically a lump sum transfer in some sense. So that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. So this sounds like, my next question was, how has this crisis affected economic inequality? What you say is, go ahead.
Oh, yes. So there is a study by Kikuchi, Kitao, and Mikoshiba. So they matched the employment status survey with the sales data of the credit card company. And using the credit card data, which sector was suffering from the current crisis becomes obvious. And then they map it into the income group or education group or occupation. Using the industry and occupation, they match who suffer from the negative shock. And they found that low-income people are suffer more from this current crisis. And also, I myself work with Motegi, examining who worked remotely, who worked from home December of the last year. And not surprisingly, we found that the high-income earners are more likely to work from home. So we think that the higher income people suffer less from the current crisis. So it exacerbated the inequality of Japan.
Okay. Let me ask you this. With the slow economy now, students are graduating university and secondary schools. What are they doing about them? Are they getting jobs, or how are they being taken care of?
So the Japanese student graduate in March. So, but the job hunting process start around this time of the year. And this year, so every year, there is a private company running survey about the vacancy of the next spring. And they implemented the survey between January and March. And their number was not bad, recently published. But the company decided to run a survey once again for the prospect job vacancy for the college graduate in the next year. Okay? So the reasoning is that since they ran the survey, they think that the situation has changed dramatically. So they decided to run the survey once again. this is apparently a bad sign for the prospect of the graduates. And Japanese labor market is quite systematic in terms of the school to work transition. So the student find a job while they are in school, and if they are once out of this track, it becomes difficult to coming back to the track. So I think it would be the quite big negative shock to the graduate in the next year.
Okay. In other words, the worst hasn't happened just yet.
Not yet. So we will see.
Because certainly in the U.S., where people graduate in June, of course,
the
worst certainly happened to them already. And it depends, I assume, as in the U.S., it depend on what your specialty is? Presumably science majors are doing better than liberal arts majors, is that correct?
Yes, I assume so. So the science majors are less likely to be affected by the negative hit.
Let me finish up with a final question, okay? At some point, things are going to get better. Maybe at next winter, at some point, we'll be back to where people aren't scared to go out anymore. Okay? Someday there'll be a vaccine. What permanent changes in the labor market or in how people behave do you think this will have produced?
So during this crisis, the remote work became more prevalent, and people recognize that the benefit of working from home. So perhaps the permanent change would be the remote work becomes more popular, and particularly the people. So there is a movement, long-term movement toward balancing work and life. And I think current transition to the remote work, or prevalence of the remote work, speed up the transition to the more family-friendly work environment.
Mm-hmm. This might also, I remember from my time spent in Tokyo, thanks to you, twice now, the subways in Tokyo are very crowded during the rush hour. Might this reduce the congestion on the subways and the trains?
Well, actually, Tokyo is starting up once again, and train get crowded. But people, I think the situation is not as bad as January before the crisis started. So I guess the train congestion will be mitigated after the recovery.
Good. One can hope so. Daiji, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for joining me. And I hope all is well with you. It's been a real pleasure. You take care.
Thank you very much.